Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories. Case file number 1203, written by Plotted Unit 1, Twisted Blood. When I was 6 years old, my sister was in the living room and I was playing in the upstairs hallway. I was getting really loud, so my sister yelled that I needed to shut up. I started walking down the stairs and called her fat face and leave me alone. My sister then grabbed the remote and threw it at me. Usually that would not be a big deal to me. We housed around roughly all the time, but the remote hit me in the face. My nose started gushing blood and the remote was broken where you could see the circuit board and the body of the remote. I hunched over crying, holding my nose. As I stood up to go downstairs to tell my mom, something strange happened. I was at the top of the stairs. I didn't walk up the stairs after my sister hit me. I looked at my hands. There was no blood. I went into the bathroom in the hall, and I looked fine. No swelling, no blood stains, nothing. When I looked down the stairs, my sister was still sitting on the couch with the remote in her hand. When I told my sister this, she thought I was crazy. I told her about it again now that we are older, and she thinks it might have been a false memory. But I remember what I was wearing, the toys, how the hit in the nose felt, in perfect detail. I think it was some weird déjà vu thing. Case notes for the file 1203, Twisted Blood. Sibling rivalries. Sometimes I wish I had grown up with a brother or a sister just to experience that, but then I read stories like this and I realize I'm the lucky one being an only child, plus more Christmas gifts. So in this case, is it a pure time reset? I'd say quantum immortality has a place, but I wouldn't really go there right away given the injury suffered was so minor. I harken back to the fact that the human body is very fragile, and even minor injuries can lead to death, but I don't think that's what happened here. I think it may have been an extremely vivid personal simulation. Sometimes when I'm out walking on my hour without a podcast, it's just my mind there, and it tends to wander into performing scenario simulations. Things on my mind like new videos to create, or if I'm going out somewhere, I'll mentally prepare for it. And I mean, most people do this, but sometimes the simulation runs so vividly that you almost lose sight of what's real. Like, I'll be walking for an hour, and half of that hour, I don't even remember walking. It was entirely in my mind. So something like that could potentially happen in this case, even though it feels like you really experienced it. Maybe it was just your subconscious and conscious mingling together to such an extent that it was almost like spending time in a hologram room in Star Trek. Pretty cool. Mind is crazy powerful. Never underestimate it. Bonus file written by Anonymous, The Ghostly Breath. I've told this story before, some months ago, but it's pretty creepy. My parents live in a nice center chimney cape just outside of Kennebunkport, Maine. The house was built around 1760 and moved to its current location in the 80s. It has sporadic paranormal activity, most of which I never experienced as they purchased the house after I moved to another state for college. One bitterly cold January, I was staying with my parents on my winter break from school. I think it was my sophomore year. An 18th century house is always a drafty mess, and with the wind whipping over the field and slamming onto the side of the house, it was damn near frigid inside. We were earning our stripes that year. My little sister, who is 7 years my junior, and I were sharing a big bed in one of the downstairs front rooms. Sharing beds makes a big difference when it's wicked cold outside. I woke up at about 8 a.m. to an almost empty house. My parents were away, and my younger brother was asleep in another room far across the house, so it was just my sister and I in the main house. As I'm lying there trying to build up the will to leave the warm bed, I start hearing a strange noise. It sounds distinctly like someone having a great deal of difficulty breathing, long, raky, phlegmy breaths. I think to myself, crap, my little sister must have one hell of a cold. After about 20 seconds of this, I roll over to check on her as she really sounds like she's going to die, except she's silent as a church mouse, wide awake, facing me. As soon as I see her face, I realize she's not making the sound, and she can hear it too. She whispers, "That's not you?" The sound is continuing even as we have a panicked whispered exchange. It's clearly coming from the bed, and it's not quiet or subtle at all. In utter disbelief, we jumped out of the bed, the struggling breathing still carrying on. We checked under the bed, all over the room, nothing. Finally it stops. We never heard it again, nor has anyone else in the family. An interesting aside, we researched the history of the house a little later, and it turns out the owners in the first quarter of the 19th century, Charles and Sally Eaton, had a bit of a rough time in the house. Between 1820 and 1830, Sally and 6 of the 9 children died of consumption, tuberculosis, in the house. I believe we may have been hearing one of those unfortunate souls' death rattle. Case notes for the bonus file: The Ghostly Breath. Ah yes, the state of Maine, Spook Central, home of the great Stephen King, and most of his books take place where the characters are in Maine as well. I haven't been, but it's definitely on the agenda, and I want to live in New Hampshire, and so it's right next door. Definitely will go. So I'll track this up to a more macabre note. It's the painful echoes of death. Well, yeah, death isn't so permanent as we know from quantum immortality, but for the souls, the echoes left behind. I mean, I do wonder how much sentience still lingers behind. And my hope is that none at all. It's a program that's recycled and repeated, but it's just a program. They're not really there, not the you that matters, the sentience. Hopefully that's true. Because you don't want to imagine that people who died horrific deaths relive that moment in perfect sentience, the player is still there. But I don't think it's possible, because if we die, our soul carries on, we don't notice, and we're just in a new host body in a new universe. So if a fragment of the soul is left behind, it's not the part that controls or enables sentience. Hopefully, but I think that's true. Bonus file written by Sparklebiscuit, The Enigma of Paradise Road. Back in high school, my boyfriend, his friends, and I decided to explore some well-known haunted places in our area. We'd never done it before, but it was midnight on a Tuesday and we were bored. We looked up places online to find the places with the most interesting backstories and lore, and stumbled across stories about this one road called Paradise Road. There was an extensive message board explaining how people had seen dark figures or headless raccoons. Cars would randomly stop working while driving through the road, and so on. We ventured onto this road, which took us a total of about 3 hours due to it being in the middle of nowhere and during a time where smartphones didn't exist. But once we turned on the road, we were all pretty excited. We decided to drive through the road once, just to get a feel of it. It was a pretty short road, and driving as slow as 5 miles an hour took us about 2 to 3 minutes to drive through. It was surrounded by these really tall woods, so when looking out the window, all you could see was trees. When we turned around to drive back the other direction, that's when all of a sudden dozens of little gold lights appeared in between the trees. They looked like they were floating Christmas lights, and they would hover slightly. Keep in mind it was 3:30 a.m. on a cold November rainy day, and we were all sober. I freaked out when I saw the lights and looked away, and when I looked back, they were all gone. I asked my friends, "Did you guys see that?" And they responded with yes. I'm not sure what it was, but it was pretty surreal and dreamlike. The weirdest thing was we weren't even expecting that. There was no description of lights or orbs appearing on the road, from what we read. I personally did not leave the car to explore because I was too scared, but my friends did, and they said they could hear faint screaming and whispering to get out of the woods. Case notes for the bonus file. The Enigma of Paradise Road. Well, this was a warning indeed, but it sounds more alien or experimental than ghostly, given the history of cars losing power, and the gold lights appearing. That strikes me more as a alien intervention. The only cases of spirits creating lights in blue orb fashion, not gold, and they're very rare. So blue orbs, could there be golden balls of lightning as well? Maybe, but I'm going to stick on this one with aliens. Get the wild hair going. And now time for the quote of the day. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Benjamin Franklin. Just going with a very classic Founding Fathers quote here. Definitely speaks to me. I think liberty is the utmost, most important thing that we take for granted, honestly. And we're not 100% free, absolutely not. But we do have a lot, especially compared to the bulk of humanity. So we should cherish that, always seek more, and protect the amount that we have now. And you can do that in various ways. It's not all political. You can take liberty in your own personal finances. Instead of spending more money, save more. Have some in cash, some in gold and silver, Bitcoin if you like that. I'm not really a fan of crypto unless it's backed by something else, but that's to the side. I think there are various ways you can take control of your life. Obviously having land, property, homestead, off-grid, or even if you're on the grid, buy yourself solar panels and a battery. So, if the worst case happens, and maybe there's a crazy storm that rolls through, and then you're not at the mercy of the grid if it goes down. You still have access, you can protect your solar panels during the storm, and then after it, when the sun comes back, you're good to go. You have battery storage as well, so all the essentials, the food won't spoil in your fridge and stuff like that. You'll still be able to live relatively normally and have a connection to the outside world if you get Starlink internet. It's pretty crazy the amount of stuff we can do just with technology now. You can have an entirely off-grid or on the grid but protected if it goes down. With solar panels, batteries, Starlink internet, gas stoves for that. You can have a wood-burning stove as well, and obviously it generates heat in the winter. It's awesome. I think it's so cool that we can be so insulated from the outside world while still engaging with it, but having your own base camp where you're covered. Recommend that to everyone. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony, signing off.